Hello and welcome back to Bicycleleggs Talks Music and another episode of favourite songs from each album. This is in fact a part two. Can you please welcome back to the channel Mr. Mike Ladano from Grab a Stack of Rock. Mike, pleasure to have you back on the channel.
Pleasure to be back and pleasure to finally close this pretty epic series that you and I did.
Yes, so this is part two of our Marillion favourite songs from each album. We split it into two parts because otherwise we would have had a feature-length episode. So even this with this one, we've got 11 albums to get through, so I reckon we're going to be going for a while. So this is starting with this is sort of what I call the independent years for Marillion. You know, they're off EMI now. They're basically on small labels or they're self-releasing. We're starting with This Strange Engine and going all the way through to An Hour Before It's Dark. So, which is the most recent album. Hopefully, I think we might be getting a new Marillion album either this year or next year. So, I believe they're in the middle of working on it. So,
I've seen postings that imply this, yes.
yes. So let's get into it. And our first one, as you were showing there, is This Strange Engine. I didn't bring it over, but it's just been released as one of their deluxe editions as well. Um, in the same format as all the EMI albums, which is really nice, so it fits in with all the rest of them and stuff. So yeah, this was an interesting album. You know, it's a bit of a departure for them as far as music goes. It's obviously a departure for them as far as being on a major label goes. What did you end up picking as your favorite song from this one, Mike?
I like this album. I'll tell you that
Yeah,
right
so
off
do
the
I.
bat. My friend Iron Tom calls this their Hootie and the Blowfish album, I guess because there are acoustic guitars on it. I don't agree with him. I have three editions of it. I love it so much. I don't have that new box set. I went with 80 Days. I love
Yeah.
80 Days. It's that Celtic vibe that it has.
Hmm.
It's very light. It's so light and airy and upbeat, and it just makes me feel good to hear it. Um, it was around that time that I got into Marillion that I found out, well, not really found out, but started exploring the half of my family that's Scottish. So, all of a sudden I become the expert on all these fish lyrics, but I really liked that Celtic vibe on 80 Days. And, as far as a song about road lyrics, I think 80 Days is top notch. I think that's just a terrific road song. Um,
Yeah,
Wonderful song,
absolutely.
and I can't help but sing along every single time.
Yeah. You know, I've never heard it called their Hootie and the Blowfish album, but I have definitely heard people refer to this period of Marillion as being their sort of crowded house period. Um, and I can hear that in a song like 80 Days, definitely. I could imagine Neil Finn writing a song like that and singing a song like that. For me, it was really, really hard to go past the title track. It's a big, epic 15-minute long track. You know, it's interesting because, people were sort of decrying the fact that Marillion had sort of lost their prog in this sort of period of the late 90s. And we'll get into that when we're talking about the next couple of albums as well. But this is one of the proggiest things they ever did. It's 15 minutes long, it's in several sections, it's got that epic sweep to it. It's still a fan favorite, it's still a concert favorite to this day. They play it a lot when they do shows. And it's one of my favorite songs. But I want to give a shout out for the shorter tracks to the opening track, Man of a Thousand Faces, because I really, really love that song. Um, and it's one of my favorite H lyrics. You know, I speak to machines with the voice of humanity, speak to the wise with the voice of insanity. I love that lyric. So yeah, but my favorite song is This Strange Engine. That's not going to surprise people. Knowing me, I'm a prog kind of guy, so that I'm going to get attracted to the 15-minute epic at the end of the album, you know. But it's an undeniably great song, so that's why I went with the title track.
If I may add to what you said about Man of a Thousand Faces,
Yeah.
there's some lines in there. I don't know precisely what they mean, but I like the way they sound. Be my guest at the feast of Satyricon. You spend the
Mm,
money that my logo is printed on. I just like the way they sound.
yeah. No, they're wonderful lyrics. So then we get the album Radiation, and this one really did. This one and the next one really divided the fans. I've got the LP with the updated cover art. Because they did re-release this on CD as well with a new mix. Because I don't think the band were ever particularly happy with the mix on this album. I don't know. I don't find a lot of difference between the two mixes, to be honest. But I have a soft spot for this album. I think it's a better album than a lot of the fans give it credit for. And this was actually a tough one for me to choose a favorite song from. So I'll be interested to see what you ended up going with this one.
Well, I'm going to start by saying that on my copy of the CD, my absolute hands down favorite track from day one was the big beat mix of Memory of Water, but we can't count that. We can't count that. That's technically a B-side that just happens to be a bonus track in my edition. But upon first playing it, that was the song. Having said that, if memory serves, I think this was my first Hogarth album. It was
Oh,
either this
okay.
or Season's End, but I want to say it was this, according to my memory. And so this album also means a lot to me. And I have a real serious attachment to many of these songs, but I had to go with Cathedral Wall. Why Cathedral Wall?
Mm,
Because it is so noisy. It's a cacophony at times. And then there's Hogarth almost whispering the lyrics, curled up tight into a ball. But then in the background, you can hear another Hogarth that's wailing, and you can hear an echo of that Hogarth wailing, curled up tight into a ball. I think it's got to be one of the most powerful songs Marillion have ever recorded. Powerful sounding. That
yeah,
keyboard, that Mark Kelly keyboard, brr, brr, incredible. It's a wall. And I think I have to always go with my original mix that I fell in love with. Um, it's almost like if you compare uh, something recorded like with that Phil Spector wall of sound in mono, and you compare it to like a later stereo remix, it doesn't have the same punch as that wall of sound mono mix. And that's what I get at a Cathedral Wall. It is literally a wall of sound.
yeah,
And yeah, that the whole album though means a lot to me. So
yeah. No, it's a really good album. It's one that's definitely overdue for a sort of a reappraisal, I think, by the fans. My favorite song on the album is also Cathedral Wall, and I don't know that there's a lot I can add to what you already said. I think yeah, it's just incredible track. The production on it, the way you've got, as you say, that whispered vocal and then the wailed vocal in the background, but really low in the mix. So you can only just kind of make it out. It's almost like a ghostly thing. It's really, really cool. But the other song that I will pick on, sort of my second favorite on the album, is the closing track, A Few Words for the Dead, which you know, again, it's a longer track. These two are the sort of like, there was a bit of a pattern here with these sort of three albums, these first three albums that they did after leaving EMI, where they would have a bunch of short songs in the first part of the album, and then they would have like an epic or a couple of epics at the end of the album. And this is no exception to that. You've got Cathedral Wall, and then you've got A Few Words for the Dead. And A Few Words for the Dead is really one of those classic Marillion songs to me that starts off quiet and gentle, and it builds and it builds and it builds until it comes to this great crescendo. And the lyric is, it's almost this, dystopian kind of lyric about, we can do all these terrible, terrible things. And then at the crescendo, it has the lyric, or you can love, you know, and it just that brings all the positivity through. And you know, that, just the idea, I think it's very relevant in sort of what's going on in the world today. And I think we're going to get to a few songs on some of these later albums that are also super relevant to what's going on in the world today. But the idea, yeah, we can be negative and we can want to do all these horrible things, or you can love, and I love that about this song. So, yeah, Few Words from the Dead is my second favorite after Cathedral Wall. So, yeah.
When the song goes "And You Can Love" and the music turns brighter, do you detect a bit of like a 1960s kind of like flower power vibe to the keyboards? Yeah,
Yes, definitely.
yeah, I love that moment.
So then we get on to Marillion.com. And I know, again, this one really did sort of divide the fans at the time. One of the songs has got saxophone on it, and yeah, it's very similar back cover on the LP as well. Again, I think this is an underrated album. I don't think it's quite as good as Radiation. That's my personal opinion. Some of the some of the songs on here were actually recorded during the Radiation sessions, and then they weren't able to quite finish them, so they brought them along to the Marillion.com sessions. Stephen Wilson is involved with this album, you know, so that's an interesting little thought because he also produced one of Fish's solo albums as well, and probably one of my favorite Fish solo albums too. Um, oh, I can't think of the name of it off the top of my head, but I'll flash it up on the screen. And yeah, so. What was your favorite song on Marillion.com, Mike?
So I got this album shortly after Radiation. I just kind of started binging on what I could get my hands on, and it was a lot of
Yeah.
music in a short period of time. But at first, I didn't care for .com. My aforementioned friend Iron Tom, who made the Hootie comment, he's like, I don't like it. And as soon as I heard it, I understood why he didn't like it, but that didn't impact on me at all. And while I love a lot of these songs, I gotta go with the upbeat, positive, rich. And that is
Hmm.
just a blast to sing along to if you can remember all the different words. Doo doo, but the doo 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 doo. And when they played it live and the entire audience is doing that in unison, they're all singing
Mm.
that melody, you know you've got something. I believe, if I remember correctly, on our last show together, I tended to lean towards a lot of the more poppy songs, and I think you may see that again. Um, I'm sure you will pick something mind blowing, but of all of these songs, I have to go with Rich because it's just so bam. And when I made mixtapes for friends, I would always put that song on if I was going to go with a .com song.
Yeah. No, fair enough. It's a great song. I will go like before I reveal what my favorite song on the album is. My second favorite was one of the short songs on this album, one of the sort of poppy songs, if you like, and that is "Tumble Down the Years," which I love that song. It's just got a beautiful, beautiful melody to it, and
And
um,
message, and message.
yes, absolutely. So, but yeah, I mean, again, I'm the prog guy when it comes to Marillion and that sort of thing, so I don't think it'll come as a surprise to anybody that my favorite song on Marillion.com is Interior Lulu. Um, just a great epic song, and it's one of the few times in this sort of latter period Marillion, in fact, even in any of the H period Marillion, it really is a throwback to sort of the Fish era, is this big wild keyboard solo that Mark Kelly does when the song breaks out. Like it starts off again quiet and you know, and then goes into this big, fast, furious instrumental section with this keyboard solo that sounds like it's completely inspired by Keith Emerson from Emerson, Lake and Palmer. It completely comes out of left field, but I love it to death. It's one of my favorite things that Mark Kelly's ever put to record, that keyboard solo. So, and then the track just then goes on, and like the band have a love-hate relationship with this song. There was one convention where they had like like a Wheel of Fortune sort of thing with songs on it. And one of them that came up was Interior Lulu, and they tried to play it and they couldn't. Like they halfway through it, they just stopped because they just forgot how it went. And they have since brought it back, like, and obviously they had to rehearse the hell out of it because it is a really, really complex song. So, trying to play it from memory after not having played it for many, many years, it's no wonder that they kind of flubbed it at that. It was one of the really early conventions, like early 2000s. So I've got it on DVD somewhere, but um, yeah, I love Interior Lulu. It's just really good, and it's just not like anything they were doing at the time. The rest of this album is mostly short songs, except for House, which is this really sort of atmospheric. It's a longer track, but it's really atmospheric and stuff. So there's again, Interior Lulu just comes completely out of left field with this sort of craziness to it. So yeah, that's what really appeals to me about that song. So that's why it's my favorite.
And articulated so well why it's your favorite too. Wow. Yeah, I love
Oh,
it too.
thank you.
I love it too. And when you said as soon as the music breaks, I knew exactly, which point you were talking about.
Yeah. So then we get into the 21st century for Marillion. We get Anoraknophobia. And this is, yes, that's the original, the pre-order package. Um, this is where I got on the Hogarth train. I knew the Fish stuff back in the sort of late 80s, but I never got past sort of those first four albums. And then I found this cheap in a record store on CD. And I thought, I'll take a punt on it. And I'm guessing that a lot of Marillion fans would be horrified to hear that that was my introduction to Steve Hogarth because I know a lot of, the band were kind of getting very antsy about their sort of prog rock roots and they were trying to disown that and all that sort of thing. I think if they had their druthers, they'd probably realize that they were kind of biting the hand that feeds there a little bit. But I love this album. I know our good friend Davy Cretan does not like this album, but yeah, I've got to contact him and see if he'll do a friendly argument with me on this album. But I really enjoyed it, and it made me want to go and hear the rest of the Hogarth catalogue, and it made me into a full-blown Marillion fan rather than just one who knew the Fish albums. So, very important album, this one for me. So, what's your favorite song on this one? Because I feel like you could. This is an album where I really feel like there are no wrong answers as far as what your favorite song is.
You know what? I am gonna if you want to follow the pattern of my picks, I bet you can guess which one my favorite is. And it's Map of the World. Again, it's just so upbeat. It's so uplifting. It's bright. Has great lyrics.
Yes.
Fantastic lyrics, follow your heart. And this is also a special album to me in one sense, in that this is the very first pre-order that I was involved with, so my name is in there. I hate that though. It's upside
Mm,
down. That would be like a Tim Derling thing to complain about the direction of which the spine is
yep.
oriented, but that drives me nuts. Of course, this has the bonus CD with number one on it. I am of mixed feelings. There's a few songs on here that I don't care for as much as others, but Map of the World I have loved since day one. And if you recall, they did like a double single with that one, and I think it was Between You and Me, the two most upbeat
Yeah.
tracks, really. Um, but Map of the World has those keyboards that sound like strings, and I love that so much. It really recalls some of the stuff that they were doing in the Holidays in Eden years, which, I actually am on record as not being a big Holidays in Eden fan, but I do love those poppy 3 to 4 minute upbeat songs. So kind
Yeah.
of on an obvious pick, but maybe the next album will be a surprise. We'll see.
Well, there you go. Yeah, Map of the World's a great. It's very anthemic, the chorus particularly. You know, it has that swell that comes into the chorus, and it's a beautiful vocal from Steve Hogarth. And of course, the lyric on that song was co-written by Nick Van Eede from Cutting Crew. So it was the one lyric on the album that Steve Hogarth couldn't quite finish. So he went to his friend and got a bit of help with it. But it's a great song. Between You and Me was almost going to be a choice of mine because I love it. Again, I think it's one of their best opening tracks. I went for This Is the 21st Century because that song tugs at my heartstrings every time I hear it. And the lyric to it just speaks to me. You know, a wise man once said, a flower is only a sexual organ, nature is cruelty and evolution. You know, just this idea that there's more to life than just the material, as it were. It's a spiritual song without being a religious song, you know. It's just about the idea that some of our experiences are just beyond, you know, the five senses, as it were. And I love that about this song. Um, and it's just a beautiful song. It's very stately, it's slow, it's got this drum machine pattern, which I think is something that puts a lot of Marillion fans off, but it doesn't put me off at all. I like the drum machine. I love the fact that then Ian Mosley comes in and plays over the top of it, and he plays some beautiful drums in the second half of this song. But and of course this came out, or it was written just before 9/11. And there's the bit about the man up in a mirrored building and he just sold the world. Um, so, you know, sort of bringing a bit of an image of the Twin Towers and that sort of thing. But it's just a song that every time I listen to it, I get a little bit choked up listening to it. So it's why it's my favorite. My second favorite, the other song that I was going to talk about was When I Meet God, because I really like that song too. And I just the little twist in the lyrics, you know, when he says, "When I meet God, I'm going to ask her what makes her laugh," you know, etc., etc. Again, it's a really beautiful song. But getting back to This is the 21st Century is the other thing is some really great guitar at the end of it. Um, there's this kind of riff that he's playing, and then it turns into a guitar solo, and yeah, I as I say, every time I hear This is the 21st Century, it stirs my soul. So it had to be my favorite song off this album.
You know, I was gonna say When I Meet God is kind of the equivalent to This Is the 21st Century. They're both up on that level. Really good.
Mm,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Love your picks.
absolutely.
And you know what you said about This Is the 21st Century, the flower, looking at it in the scientific point of view, you lose the beauty. It reminded me of a lyric from a song that was written for the next album that didn't make the next album, but there's a line that goes, feel inside the atoms where the science breaks down. And I think
Mm,
that's kind of similar in direction, similar in message.
yeah, absolutely. So then we get 2004's Marbles. And my goodness, I don't know about you, Mike. This is one of my absolute all-time favorite Marillion albums. I love this
Uh,
album to death. This is the 2 LP version, and then as you showed there, there's the um deluxe pack from the pre-orders and that sort of thing. But then I love this album so much when they released the full album because the 2 LP is the same as the one CD version, not the two CD version. So when they put the two CD version out on vinyl in a 3 LP box set, I had to have that as well. So that's how much I love this album. You know, I haven't done a Marillion ranking yet, but I can tell you what, this will be a top three Marillion album. Probably battling it out for top spot with Brave and Afraid of Sunlight because I love those albums too. But A lot of songs to choose from. I'd be interested to see if you did go for one of the more epic tracks on this one or whether you went for one of the shorter songs.
Well, I could have easily chosen Ocean Cloud. That is
Mm.
about as epic as they come. I was just trying to get my discs out so I could look at the track listing, and I'm heartbroken to see that the glue that holds on one of the tabs is come off. So I need to
Oh no.
re-glue. But again, that's another campaign edition that I bought, and to me, this only exists as a two CD set. I've never heard the single disc version. In my brain, it doesn't exist at all. It's only ever been a double album, and there's so many
Yeah.
different directions you could go. And I think a more conventional pick for me would have been Don't Hurt Yourself, which it went top 10 or something like that. The fans drove it up to top 10 or something crazy like that. Um, I ended up going with one of the songs that's exclusive to the double, Drilling Holes. And
Mm.
I find Drilling Holes to be a really delightful kind of change of pace on disc two. It just all of a sudden goes into this very strange experimental song with very whimsical, almost John Lennon-ish surreal lyrics. Um, there's a line in there that I like. Most of the band turned up. I just love that kind of
Mm.
self-referencing stuff that's in the middle of it. Um, it's such an experimental song, even for this band. It's almost industrial sounding. Like it's not reliant upon industrial sounds or samples, but just the rhythm at the beginning of it is almost industrial. Yet there's this
Yeah.
acoustic guitar plucking away too. It's sort of an odd duck. It's sort of a deep cut. I don't know if I'm sure they've played the entire album live, so I'm sure the song has been played live, but I highly doubt it makes it into the set list regularly. As you alluded, this is a very strong album. And I once wrote Steve Hogarth an email and I told him it's my favorite double album of all time. I don't know. Like, I don't know. Like, I guess that means I like it better than The Wall. Yeah, I do. It's a remarkable album. I would put it very near the top in my top three Steve Hogarths. It would be very hard to rank. Thankfully, you're not asking me to do that. But I would put Ocean Cloud as my second pick, and also as my I predict Bicycle Legs will pick.
Okay. Well, you actually, I'll have to disappoint you there because my favorite song on the album is actually the opening track, The Invisible Man. Um, Again, I mean, it is a more epic track. It's like about 11 minutes long. It's just an incredible way to open the album. It starts off, the world's gone mad. And, I identified with this song. There was a period in my life around the time that this album came out or a little after where I really identified with the lyric in this song. And that's not a really good thing, boys and girls, because this is a dark song. You know, the idea of being invisible in the world and nobody knowing you're there. And, especially, towards the end, Steve Hogarth is howling at the end of it, when he's doing, I'm not even going to attempt to sing it because I don't have the voice for it. But, he's doing, I am the invisible man. And, he's just absolutely, shredding his larynx, singing this song. The passion in it is just incredible. And again, it's one of these songs where they go through, it builds and it builds and it builds up to this massive climax at the end of it. And it comes to a full stop at the end, you know, just one of the most incredible tracks I think this band has ever done. Um, I was almost going to go with Fantastic Place too, because I think that's a beautiful, beautiful song. And that's a concert favorite, that one, Fantastic Place. And that's a much more positive song, which is nice. So to balance out The Invisible Man, which is, as I say, quite dark. So there you go. My favorite, The Invisible Man.
And if I may say, the one line in The Invisible Man that always grabbed me back then was, I will scream again. I am perfectly sane. Because at
Yeah,
that point in my life, I felt anything but, you know?
yeah,
And yeah, that
absolutely.
song always spoke to me too.
Yeah. So then we get Somewhere Else. And I think a lot of people found this album to be a bit of a disappointment after, Marbles being such a highlight. And I mean, it was only a single album on CD. It's a double album on vinyl, but it's a short double album. I think it's only about 50 odd minutes long. And there was no campaign for this one, which I think really disappointed people. There was no pre-order, there was no deluxe box or anything like that. It took them 3 years to put this album together after Marbles, and I think a lot of fans felt like the band would have more than this to show for that 3 years. They've become a lot slower with their albums in recent years. Like it's been a few years since the last one. But going back to it and listening to it after all that sort of hoo-ha has cleared, I think this is a better album than people give it credit for. It's still not one of my all-time favorite Marillion albums, but I think there's some really good music on this album. Maybe there's one song in particular that really rankles the fans, and I wouldn't blame them for that. But um, on the whole, I think this is a stronger Marillion album than people give it credit for. So, what did you end up choosing as your favorite song off this one?
So I have to begin by saying that Marillion and I hit a cliff at this point.
Hmm.
I was totally in love with the band on Marbles. As I said, I sent Hogarth that email. And this is at the first time where I felt like I'm not connecting. And I tried and I tried and I tried. And I remember going outside for walks, listening to it on my earbuds in the middle of winter, just trying to connect to this album. And I just failed. And unfortunately, from this point forward in the show, I'm going to have a lot less to say about each album because it's a lot hard. I hardly know some of these albums. They've just, so many of them have failed to connect. And this is the first one. Having said that, I really like Faith. That was the song that I was quoting earlier. It was in the batch of songs written for Marbles, as I recall. They played it live around that time, but it didn't make album. It might have even
Yeah.
been two albums before. It might have even been earlier. Incidentally, I had a version that came with a three-song DVD. And I also have on vinyl, I think you probably have the bonus live songs as well.
Mm.
I like some of these songs now. The other half is really nice. Thank You, Whoever You Are is really, it's got a great chorus and it's got those synth strings that I love. But at the end of the day, I went for the title track Somewhere Else. It's
Hmm.
it's more it's left of center. It's very light. It's more maybe along the lines of a .com kind of track. It's not as hard hitting as maybe one of the songs. I'm guessing it's Most Toys that the fans don't like. I'm guessing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I'm gonna go with the title track, Somewhere Else. I think it's remarkable. I'm kind of rediscovering this album, so I can't go into a lot of detail about the song itself, but it really spoke to me, the lightness of it and the production of it. Um, it kind of didn't jump out at me way back in the day, but now does,
Mm.
probably for the same reasons that it didn't before, because it's almost jazzy. It's almost
Yeah.
jazzy. Yeah. So I,
Yeah,
I'm gonna go with that
absolutely.
one.
Yeah, absolutely. Agree with you 100%. And it's my favorite song on the album as well. I love the lyric is quite, it's one of those surrealist lyrics that Hogarth used to like to write. I think of that part in the song, Mr. Taurus ate a thesaurus. It's got that real sort of nursery rhyme kind of thing going to it, that section of the song. But no, it's a great song. It definitely is quieter. It's got a bit of a jazzy feel to it, as you said, but I really like it. I actually feel like musically it points a little rather than going back to sort of .com or that sort of thing. I feel like it points forward to what they would do with the next couple of albums with the two Happiness of the Road albums. So, but the other song that I was going to pick other than Somewhere Else is See It Like a Baby, which I really like. Again, real anthemic sort of quality to it. So, that's what I really like about that song. But yeah, look, I understand why this album was considered to be a major disappointment at the time it came out because it was coming off the back of, arguably one of the greatest Marillion albums ever. And it really, you know, if you play it straight after listening to Marbles, yeah, you're going to have a letdown because it's not on that quality. But if you listen to it on its own terms, again, it's not a perfect album. If I did a ranking of the Marillion catalog, it would be in the bottom half of that ranking without a doubt. But there's definitely some really worthwhile music on this album. There's probably only a couple of songs, like most toys, that I really don't care for. So, so yeah, then we get to Happiness is the Road. This is the deluxe edition. Now, of course, this was released as two albums. On the you can see there's two different titles. You've got the Hard Shoulder and you've got Essence. Well, Essence is number one, Hard Shoulder. I don't know why I've got those backwards in here. I'm gonna fix that now. So there you go. Essence number one, Hard Shoulder number two. I've got the vinyl, the original vinyl pressings of these, which are like on 45 RPM. These are hard to come by. There's only like 2,000 of them. They're numbered. You can see there. They're numbered. So that's Essence part one, and this is Hard Shoulder part two. And I've got the same number for both of them, which is really cool. They're both number 483. So
Oh, wait, you had to buy those separately. They didn't come together.
I don't remember when I got these. I may have got them at the time, and I may have ordered them together, but they were sold separately. Yes. So,
It's
but
interesting.
I think if you ordered them together at the same time, they would arrange it so you got the same number on both of them. So that's obviously what I did back in the day because they're both number 483, as I say. So interesting albums, these, because part two is actually what was originally supposed to be the album, The Hard Shoulder. And then they just got this creative burst while they were writing, and they ended up writing all of what ended up becoming part one, which is Essence. So, and I feel like the two albums have quite different flavor from each other too. So, what was on part one, Essence? What's your favorite song on Essence?
Make sure I grabbed Essence. Yes, I did. This time when Marillion came out with a new album, it was so much music that I
Mm,
did not have the time to absorb it. And so I've never really properly appreciated these albums the way somebody could if they immersed themselves. But from day one, the song that struck out to me was This Train Is My Life. And one of the reasons is because my wife and she was coming in, we weren't married yet, and she was coming in from Brampton, Ontario on a train. And I spent a lot of hours just waiting at that train station for that train. That train was my life in a lot of ways.
mm.
But the music, it's so soft yet intense. And so is Steve's vocals. They're kind of mournful in a way. But the melody of that song is so incredible. And the way that Rothery kind of plays the melody on his guitar, the sound, the tone of his guitar. My goodness, everything about that song is perfect. So I have to go with This Train Is My Life from Essence. It's just a
Yeah,
remarkable song.
yeah, I could not agree more. It is my favorite song on Essence as well. And I'm just going to echo everything that you said. It's an absolutely beautiful song, and Steve Rothery's guitar on it is absolutely beautiful too. I was listening to that song again this morning just before we came on air, and yeah, it's absolutely a gorgeous, gorgeous song. But I also love on this album "Woke Up," which is, lyrically, it's got a bit of a repetitiveness to it, but there's purpose behind that. It's sort of about, getting up in the morning and that sort of thing, but it's also about waking up more generally, not just from waking up from being asleep, but just sort of waking up in the world that we're in at the moment and that sort of thing. So, yeah, part one, Essence, of Happiness is the Road, to me is a much more sort of song oriented album. Whereas part two, which we're about to get into and pick our favorite from, The Hard Shoulder, I often refer to part two as almost being Marillion's psychedelic album. You know, there's a lot of really trippy kind of music on part two. And I love that about it. So, what did you end up picking for The Hard Shoulder as your favorite song?
Funny you should say that. I waffled between a few songs on the hard shoulder, but I ended up going with one that might be a little bit trippy, which is Thunderfly, the opening song. And the reason I went with Thunderfly is, well, I think it just kind of jumps out because it's so I don't want to use the word upbeat again because that's not what I'm going for, but it's energetic. It has a lot more energy than I
Hmm.
was expecting. A little bit more rocking, a little bit more rock and roll. And yeah, I don't know what a Thunderfly is, but it's a catchy title, and it's been the song that's been in my head for most of this week. That it's mostly that riff. And
Yeah.
you know, with Marillion, it's not always the riff. It's rarely the riff.
Hmm.
But on Thunderfly, it is. It most definitely is. So that's why I picked it.
Yeah. No, it's a great choice. Oh, you know, a lot of these titles are weird on this album, aren't they? You know, I mean, there's the man from the planet Marzipan, you know, so that sort of thing. But the song I went for has also got a bit of a weird title as my favorite song, and that is Asylum Satellite Number One. Um, Again, it's got real psychedelic vibe to it, and that's what I like about it musically. It's got these sort of, Steve Rothery's, it sounds like his guitar's being played through a Leslie cabinet. And, so it's got that kind of shimmeriness to it, which I really, really like. And again, it's an odd lyric. I don't know quite what to make of it, but I really, really like the way Steve Hogarth sings this song. So, and I just love the overall sort of trippy psychedelic vibe to it. I almost went with the man from the planet Marzipan because again, it's just kind of out there. But yeah, my favorite is Asylum Satellite Number One, and I think it was right from the first time I heard these albums. So yeah,
I wonder if that is a Leslie effect on that song or how they got that sound. I've
yeah.
always wondered.
And just for the record too, this is the first of the um, campaign editions that I have my name in. So, oh, you never opened yours. Oh, okay. You just yeah, but you left the left the
I'm a
shrink
toy
wrap on.
I'm a toy collector. I figure out interesting ways to open packaging and keep things more or less intact.
Fair enough. I tend to keep the shrink wrap on albums if they're not a gatefold sleeve. But if they're a gatefold sleeve, I have to take the shrink wrap off because I want to be able to open it.
I know, there's no choice. There's no choice.
Yeah. So then the next album, Sounds That Can't Be Made, I feel like this set the template for basically what we've gotten ever since with Marillion. Would you agree with that? Like this album sort of is the next albums, the two albums that come after it, have a similar vibe to this album, don't they?
They do, but at the same time, I see this one as a much more distinct piece. I have two editions here, by the way. Um,
Yeah.
I see it as
Yeah, I
much
got that.
more song oriented, I think. But we'll get there. We'll talk about it. This one I actually connected with for the
Yeah.
first time in two albums. This one is the first one I connected with. And one thing I love, I don't know if you know this, but that right there is called the Arecibo message. I think it's actually oriented
Yes.
like this. So that's a message that we sent into space that can be decoded by an alien species using math. So I love that. That's nerd right there. And that's me. And I've known that since I was a child. I didn't have to Google it. I saw it and I'm like, oh my God, it's the Arecibo message. So I don't know. I loved this album pretty much from day one. Again, it connected with me. Opening track Gaza, I'm going to predict that you might pick that one as your progressive rock epic, but I may be wrong. You might pick The Sky Above the Rain, for example. Power is another song which I think was better live even than it was on album. But uh, the end of the day, I just went with the title track. It's
Yeah.
so I love his vocal on it. That na 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 na. I can't hit the note, but when he hits that one note, it's beautiful. I love the kind of monotone refrain of sounds that can't be made, can't be made. It's just it has a nice beat to it. Um, it really sort of takes a lot of the elements that have been brewing within Marillion from .com forward and kind of just distills them into this nice, relaxing, vibey, very vibey title track. And I think it's just a remarkable song. And, there's a lot of great stuff on this album, I'm sure you will tell us.
Mm.
But, whichever version you get, be it the original or this one with some really cool remixes, um, I think the title track stands out.
Yep.
It
No, fair
just
enough.
it's different, it's a little different than the other songs on the album.
Yeah, absolutely. I almost went with Power because I remember when that came out as sort of a pre-release single, I thought it was a great anthemic song. And yeah, I maybe it is better live, I don't know, but I love the version that's on the album, and I remember instantly loving it when I first heard it sort of online before the album actually came out. So, but in the end, you picked right. I did go with Gaza. It's an interesting song, this Gaza, not just because, I mean, again, so relevant to what's going on in the world today, but also, and it's an epic, epic track. It's about 18 minutes long or something like that. But I tell you what, this is, I think, Gaza is the closest Marillion ever got to heavy metal. There is some really, really crunchy power riffing from Steve Rothery on this song. Some really dirty, distorted guitar that you just don't normally expect. And I like that about it because it's not something they ever had done before, and it's not really something they've ever done since. So in that respect, it makes it stand out as something unique in the Marillion catalog. So I like that about it, but I love the message about it too. And, Steve Hogarth really did his research. He actually talked to Palestinian refugees in Gaza to write this lyric. So, you know, it comes from the heart. It comes from, I mean, and just what the people of Gaza have had to go through the last 18 months. You know, I mean, this song just speaks to that before it even happened. So, I mean, it's just an incredible track. So I had to pick Gaza from this album. So, yeah, you got me on that one, Mike.
It speaks that this album came out in 2013, or at least this edition of it did, and
Mm,
now it's relevant more than ever again. It's tragic, but Marillion are never afraid of shying away from messages. They've been
no,
doing it since maybe even 1989 or earlier, but
yeah, abs
more power to them, I guess.
yeah. Them, I mean, the next album, this one, is all messages, isn't it? I mean, every song on this album
Yes.
pretty much is political in one way or another. I don't know about you, Mike. I was never a huge fan of this cover.
No, it looks cheap. And I don't
Yeah.
like the title. I'm sorry, I don't like the title.
Mm,
I think it's cheap too.
yeah. So, and this is an album that it's got a couple of short songs and then it's got three just absolute sidelong epics. So, this is probably the most epic, the most cinematic in scope, I think, of all the Marillion albums. So, I'll be interested to see what you ended up going for this one.
Okay, so these next two albums I'm really unfamiliar with. So I literally played them as much as possible over the last several days. And I find a lot of it blurring together a bit. These are more albums than individual songs or even individual suites of
Mm,
songs. Because you do have things recurring, of course. This is a concept album, let's face it. Let's call
yes.
it what it is. Like in the first track, El Dorado, there's a song called FEAR. And then in the second last track, the New Kings, we have the full F Everyone and Run.
Yeah.
Which you know what? I went with the New Kings, the track the whole thing, the New Kings, that whole refrain, "We are the New Kings." It stuck with me. Um, no, I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on Brexit or anything else going on in this album, but the references were pretty clear. It's pretty clear who the Leavers and the Remainers are.
Mm.
Um, and I couldn't even tell you the complexities of the situation, which is maybe one reason why the album didn't connect with a Canadian kid, or kid. I just called myself a kid, a Canadian guy. Um, anyway, and I don't like the cover either. I don't know if that supposed to be gold with like
Yes,
the elements symbol. I don't like it. I'm
I think it's
sorry. But I do wish I had that cool campaign edition that you have.
that's that one there. Yeah.
Yes, I wish I had that.
So keep a lookout for them. They do turn up. So yeah. But look, I do get the politics on this one because I'm a bit of a political junkie. I love sort of knowing what's going on in the world and all that sort of thing. And I was following the whole Brexit thing, absolutely, really, really closely. But I feel like the New Kings, that song has got a new relevance now, um, with the incoming second Trump administration and all that sort of thing. And you look at the song that Russia's Locked Doors, and it's talking about oligarchs and all that sort of thing. That can be applied to America right now with your Elon Musks and your Mark Zuckerbergs and your Jeff Bezoses and all that sort of thing. So again, a song that's finding a new relevance. So it is my favorite song on the album too. It's an incredible suite. It runs together really, really well. I almost went with El Dorado because I think the opening suite is also really, really good. It's about sort of, late stage capitalism and that sort of thing. And so I can totally understand the relevance of that as well. But this is a daunting album, you know, because it is basically you've got four sides of vinyl, and three of those four sides are side long epics. And then side two has got it's a slightly different track listing to what's on the CD to make it fit on four sides of vinyl. Um, you've got the shorter songs Living in Fear and White Paper, which I think are both really good songs too. Um, but yeah, I mean it's hard to go past the New Kings, isn't it? I mean, as the standout track on the album. We get another album, the most recent one, and that is An Hour Before It's Dark. I got the Yes, I got the campaign one of that as well, and I got the signed album and campaign disc. So that's some slightly shorter tracks on this one. They're still sort of multi-part suites, but they're not whole side long epics. And then you've got a couple of, sort of standalone songs. You got some songs on here that are only 4 minutes long, or 4.5 minutes long, which is not something they've done much of on the last few albums. So much of what they did on these last three albums was extended pieces. So I'll be interested to see what you ended up going for on this one because for me, I've got two songs that I picked out and they're quite different from each other. So
So this is an album that I really need to devote more time with. Maybe a year and a half ago with Todd Evans, I did a Marillion ranking show, and he ranked An Hour Before It's Dark very, very highly. So I made a mental note to listen to it more often, which I never did. Um, Listening to it today, I went with Care, track 7.
yep.
Maintenance Drugs, An Hour Before It's Dark, Every Cell, and Angels on Earth. Again, I'm not going to be able to talk too much in terms of specifics, just that what I was hearing in terms of lyrics were tweaking me. I really liked what he was saying in the lyrics. And as always, Marillion give you something atmospheric for music, something with some kind of emotional depth, with some kind of interesting melodic flavors, sometimes not necessarily working like a verse, chorus, verse, but in terms of just instrumentation. And so Care is my pick. This is a very deep album. I wouldn't be surprised if you could pull a concept out of the album and call it a concept album.
Mm,
Again, Todd told me to listen to it more, and I should have listened because I just did not have the time to absorb, especially these two. I focused on these
mm.
two the most in my listening this week, and I wish I just had a little bit more time for an hour before it's dark. I think this one is eventually going to click with me, though.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, I like Fear. I like An Hour Before It's Dark a lot better. I think it's a better album overall. I think Fear was just a little bit too much with those three side-long epics. It's just so much to take in. Whereas I think this has got more songs. They're slightly shorter songs on the whole. I agree with, I don't know if I'd put it quite as high as Todd might rank it, but it would be in the top half of my Marillion ranking if I ever get around to actually doing that. Because there's like 19, 20 albums. It's a I may do a top 10, who knows? But I also went with Care. It's the longest track on the album, funnily enough. Um, and I agree with, lyrically, it's heartbreaking because it really seems to be about a cancer patient and, going through chemotherapy and all this sort of horrible sort of stuff. But it's sung with a tenderness, lyrically, it's heartwarming, even though it's kind of tragic because it's, obviously it's talking about cancer. But it's a beautiful song. Musically, it does what you want, those epic Marillion tracks to do, in that it builds up and it builds up and it goes through different sections, and you know, it's got that slow burn until you get to the end, and it, just hits you right between the eyes at the end. I love that about it. But you know what? I almost went with one of the really short songs on this album, and that's Murder Machines, because I really like that song. The only thing is, I would have probably picked Murder Machines as my favorite song if I could have picked the 12-inch mix. Because I actually like that better. You'll
What is this
find, I
12
think
inch
it's,
mix? I'm not
it,
aware of
I,
that.
I think,
Is it?
you have this one, don't you? Yeah. The,
No,
the
no, I have a
campaign.
standard retail.
Oh,
This is just the 2 disc standard retail.
oh, okay. Well, this one you get it as a bonus track at the end. You get the Murder Machines 12-inch remix, and
Oh,
I think it's actually the superior version. Go on YouTube. I'm sure you can find it, and
I'm
have a
gonna need
listen.
that edition of the CD now.
I'll be interested to see what you think of it if you go and have a listen to it. But yeah, I probably would have picked it if I could have had that, but it's a bonus track, so technically I
Right.
don't think you can include that. So
No.
yeah, I ended up going with Care as well. So there you have it, everyone. Those are our favorite songs from the Marillion albums from 1997 all the way through to 2022. Look at that stack. There's 11 albums there, boys and girls, so plenty to get your teeth into. If you don't know the later Marillion stuff, there's a lot of excellent, excellent music on these albums. Well worth seeking out. Mike, thank you so much for doing the show. It's always a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you. I feel like we've finally achieved what we set out to do.
Yes, indeed. And you will be seeing Mike again on the channel this year because we are going to be doing more shows. So look out for that. If you're not already subscribed to Grab a Stack of Rock, please go and rectify that immediately. I will leave a link in the description, of course. Please do like, share, and subscribe here. It really does help the channel out. If you're new to the channel, please go and have a look at some of my other videos. I have everything playlisted, so if you want to see some of my other favorite songs from each album shows, including our part 1 on Marillion, I have a playlist for those. If you want to see some of my favorite albums of all time, I have a playlist for those. And if you want to see my appearances on other people's channels, and I have an upcoming appearance on Grab a Stack of Rock coming soon, I also have a playlist for those. If you want to follow me on social media, I'm at bicyclelegs on Instagram, Twitter, and a bunch of other places. I also have a dedicated Bicyclelegs Facebook page. Links are all in the doobly-doo. Please do give those all a follow and join in the conversation. I'd really love to have you there. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.